Innovations and Solutions at the International Code Council. I am also leading, along with my colleague Ryan Kolker, the Buildings Breakthrough Priority Action Area 5 on capacity and skills. And that is the topic of our presentation today. And we're going to tell you a little bit about what the deliverable for this year for the Priority Area 2, which is also, or Priority Area 5, which is called B5 for short, Buildings Breakthrough 5. And we'll get into that a little bit, but hopefully we'll have a really good session with examples from some of the resources that are going to be included in the portal, a very small sampling of a portal that will hopefully be very large eventually. Can you advance the slide, please? Yeah, thank you. That's me. And then we're going to have a reflection from some policymakers about their feelings about how the portal may be useful as they look to build capacity both for personnel and training as well as institutional capacity. So let's go to the next slide, please. If anyone is not familiar with the Buildings Breakthrough, I'll just give a very quick summary. The Buildings Breakthrough was launched at COP28 in Dubai, and there were a number of governments that signed on initially to make a pledge to make nearly zero emission and resilient buildings the new normal by 2030. And since then, with the leadership of Global ABC, there have been a number of groups working to deliver solutions to help those countries to achieve this pledge. And so there are 6 main working groups. We're talking about Working Group 5 today, and they all focus on different areas of this NZERB pledge, nearly zero emissions and resilient building is NZERB. And so I'll be using that term because it's a little bit easier. And so the countries that have made this commitment will also have access to these tools, but the tools are also not limited to the countries that have signed on to the Buildings Breakthrough. They will be widely accessible to everyone because we want everyone to make NZERBs the new normal by 2030. Next slide, please. So in Priority Action Area 5, B5, we started out by trying to map the landscape of what the needs are. We know that there is a need to build capacity, that having a building code or a standard that helps you that maps the way to achieve resilience or energy efficiency in your building does not necessarily result in those buildings being safer and more resilient unless you have the capacity to make sure that you move from document to building and building operation. And so we looked at the landscape and said, well, there are some skills that are needed. So this is what we call personnel capacity building. All of the practitioners, the designers, the policymakers, the regulatory officials who are doing inspections and plan review, the people who are actually doing the construction, the people who are doing inspections, they all need to have a certain skill set and an understanding of what the requirements are to achieve NZERBs. And so what does the landscape map look like to make sure that people have all of the training that they need to achieve NZERBs? That's one side of the equation. The other side is the institutional capacity. If you don't have if you don't have a department that reviews plans, then how do you know that the designs that are being submitted or that are used to construct buildings are aligned with your green code or your resilient building code? So you do need this institutional structure that forces compliance. And that forces compliance. And so that means you also need to have people who are, on the personnel side, people who are trained to inspect a building, but on the institutional side, some kind of system and regulatory enforcement capacity so that buildings actually do receive inspections. So that's kind of what we're looking at with building the capacity on the institutional side, that you have the framework for the codes to be enforced, the standards to be enforced, and then on the personnel side, the people who are trained to actually do the work. And so when we were looking at this landscape, we made a couple of assumptions. And looked at sort of the this target shows sort of the main actors that are involved in trying to achieve this this NZERB goal in the capacity building. And so at the core, there needs to be political will, and that's usually coming from a national level, unless there's a sort of a federated system, and then sometimes the cities or states have more of a role in that. But there needs to be the political will before you can even talk about achieving NZERBs. And then below that, there needs to be policies and regulations, which are also sometimes coming from the national level, sometimes from a subnational level. But those policies and regulations need to be right-sized and enforceable. And so we're just accepting these two things as a given, that those presumably exist when we're talking about the capacity building question. What we're talking about is the implementation and compliance of the policies and regulations, and most of that happens on a local level. And so that's our target area of focus. And then there are also, we recognize, supporting activities that can be undertaken by civil society organizations, the private sector, insurance, financing organizations that can help to push either compliance or the political will or the policies and regulations. So this doesn't operate in a vacuum, the implementation and compliance, but this is the area of focus when we're talking about capacity building. And so when we're talking about capacity building, again, we're assuming that the codes and standards are in place and that most of the policies are in place. And we're really just talking about how do we make sure that people and institutions are set up to achieve compliance. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we started looking separately at institutional capacity building needs and personnel capacity building needs, we looked at one main question for each. So on the institutional level, what are the functions that a government needs to ensure compliance at the local level? So what does the ecosystem, the regulatory enforcement ecosystem look like, and are all of those pieces in place? For the personnel side, we started looking at very broadly, in a brainstorming kind of way, what individuals and groups need to be trained, need to have skills to achieve the NZERB goals, to implement the designs that are drawn to achieve green and resilient buildings. And then separately, the second question for each, what can each of these groups, the institutions, for instance, do to help to improve compliance? And separately, what, for the personnel side, what can private sector institutions do to help support the compliance initiatives? Because we know that these functions, both on the institutional and personnel side, don't have to be borne by one entity, right? There are, on the institutional side, there are options for third-party providers. On the personnel side, there are many, many organizations that offer training, that offer credentialing, and that can be depended on to play a role in this system. So it's a big task that we had, and we started out with sort of brainstorming the landscape map. Could I have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Whoops, no, sorry. Back one. No, ours, all right. Next. Next slide. Okay, great. And so the goal, as we kind of went through as we started the project, the goal was to have a portal, an online portal that could be a starting point and a landing zone for existing resources. Because there are countries that are doing these things already. There are private sector bodies that are doing these things already, that have training, that have organizational mapping for jurisdictions, for compliance. But it's, where do you start, right? If you're a policymaker and you've identified a need, there's not a centralized location where you can go to learn about what have other people done. You're doing this sort of search around the world. And if you're looking at, for instance, credentialing architects in a certain NSERB related category, there are institutes of architects around the world. And so are you going to go to all of them and figure out who has a program that's closest to yours? And the same thing goes across the board for all kinds of skills and training and organizational ideas. And so what we wanted to do is create a starting point so that people are not reinventing the wheel, and so that people can start from something, even if it's not completely plug and play, or if it's in a different language, sometimes it's easier to translate instead of recreating something from scratch. And so the idea was to create this portal of all of the resources that exist. Now, that resulted, between our brainstorming of mapping the landscape and doing a call for resources, we ended up with a lot of ideas. And so we needed to sort of downscale this for the first launch, the first phase of the portal launch. So we did a general call after we defined the needs for existing tools. And we started to get some, and we were trying to map what we received against what we defined the needs are, and then had some dialogue with the national government bodies that are a member of this B5 group. And so we had one-on-one dialogues with those governments to understand what their priorities are, because we wanted to have the first phase of the portal very relevant to address those needs. And so once we identified those, then we did a very specific call to action to that identified those resources that we had prioritized for the launch of the portal. And then we went through a process of curating the submissions. And this is sort of where we are right now. Can we have the next slide, please? We started out with eight institutional categories and 20 personnel categories of need. And then within those, we had a lot of identified needs, it was too many. It became burdensome to try to gather all of that. So then, after we did sort of a call for input and spoke with the national government bodies one-on-one, we narrowed it down to 9 institutional priorities and 9 personnel priorities that we would about which we would gather resources. And I can't remember what else was on that slide. Do you remember? All right, so we narrowed it down. We went through, earlier this year at the Global ABC Assembly, we did a feedback session, got a little bit more input, and then we did a very specific call for resources that, where we asked people to give us the resources that we definitely wanted to include in phase 1 of the portal. Okay, next slide. We're getting there. I'm not going to read through all this. I'm just going to give you an idea of what the final categories were that we determined should be included in the first phase of the portal, and these were the areas where we called out, where we gave a specific call for information on the personnel side. And then, can you advance to the next slide? On the institutional side. So these were the areas that we identified specifically. In the end, we received a lot of submissions in these categories on institutional and personnel, and we also received a lot of other resources, which were great, that were just categorized as sort of other. And so as we're looking to launch the portal, we want to include all of the resources. If people are taking the time to submit their resources, we want them to be available to everyone who's looking for solutions. Can you advance to the next slide, please? And so that we're still collecting resources. That's the QR code to submit resources if anybody has them. Again, we're welcoming that the resource submission includes the priority areas, but there are also opportunities to submit other resources. And like we'll take the resources in any language, as I said, and we think that this is a great opportunity for people with resources for institutional or personnel capacity building to get better visibility, right, for their resources. They can be free, they can be paid. It's really just a link, or we'll host the PDF on the portal. And it's an opportunity to give policymakers a starting point when they're developing their own NZERB pathways. Okay, let's go to the next slide, and I'm gonna attempt to walk through this slide. This is can you pause for a second? This is a sneak peek of the portal concept, and we just went through this last night. It's not totally ready, but this is the landing page, which already exists on the Global ABC website. It's listed as the Knowledge Platform, and it will stay the same. It'll have the featured resources and the trending resources, and then it will also have an opportunity to search for, to submit your resource instead of using the QR code from the prior screen. And is this the, yeah, and then it will have the opportunity to put in a search term, natural language search, like a Google search. And I think we can play this. Oh no, this is just a static slide. So it will have the opportunity to do a search, and eventually we'll have a lot of the tags and categories included here. Sorry, it's hot here. All right. So you'll be able to find exactly what you need through a simple, streamlined process, and we're still in the process of going through what this will actually look like in practice. But you can go to the next slide, and there's another little demo. So this is how you would search for capacity. If you were going to search for capacity building, what kind of comes up? So if you search for capacity building, it's going to bring up resources that have been submitted specific to capacity building, the things that we're talking about now, the things that have been submitted. We'll get a little, and then you can sort by relevance, sort by date, and all of these resources will then be available. And then there's going to be other filters that will help to further identify or to further narrow down to the specifics of the kind of resource you're looking for, because just by for example, we've received over 300 resource submissions, and so there's got to be a good user-friendly way to kind of navigate that, and so that's what we're working on right now. And then one more demo. Was there one more demo? Back one? Can you play this demo? And then there will be also an opportunity to search the Knowledge Hub for keywords. So if you're looking for something, I mean, building resilience is and capacity building, those are very, very general. But the idea is that once you get something like this, you'll be able to also pull it up and figure out what tags that it uses and search for other resources that use those same tags. And then get a full scope of the resources. So that's a sneak peek of the portal. We were hoping to have it launched by today. It's not. We're still working through some of the design, obviously, and we will have it hopefully up, hopefully before the end of the year, but I can't guarantee that. The team is working on it. and we won't be able to upload all of the resources immediately. So we're starting with a small number, and we'll continue collecting resources. But what we would like to hear from the people who are listening to this or watching it, watching the recording, is what kind of resources are you looking for? Because we can put out further calls for resources. And so this is not, we're not done when we launch the portal. We will continue to identify needs and put out calls for additional resources to be submitted. With that, I'm going to invite Liz Beardsley to come up to the stage, and she's going to bring with her a panel of people who have submitted resources, and they're going to give us an idea of what their resource does, how it can be used, just to give everybody an idea of the kind of really valuable information that can be found in the portal once it's launched. So we have a couple of in-person presentations and a couple online, and then we're going to move to a panel discussion as the first part of this. So Liz, please join me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. That was a great overview of what's happening with capacity building and training under the Buildings Breakthrough. Liz Beardsley, Senior Counsel at U.S. Green Building Council. I want to thank our partners, the Global ABC and the Buildings and Cooling Pavilion for this session, and also International Code Council, Delta Electronics Foundation, the Climate Framework, for being co-sponsors of the session. So really appreciate that. As Judy said, we do have a hybrid session today, which will be hopefully all go be fun. I'm just going to make a few intro remarks, and then we'll turn to Dr. Chen, and then have a few videos and try to come together at the end for deeper discussion. And we will invite audience questions at the end, I believe. So I will introduce each person as we go. So next. So USGBC is pleased to support the capacity building priority action under the Buildings Breakthrough. Education and training has been at the core of our mission for our 30-year existence. And we have many, many partners around the globe that are helping to educate people throughout the building supply chain. I think we're all here because we know near zero emission and resilient buildings are possible. There are many examples around the world, but it's still not the norm. And so that's where we have to use all of the levers, including training, education, and outreach, to make this the new business as usual. That's what we aspire to achieve collectively. Next, please. So just a snapshot of some of the ways that our organization has engaged in education. We do have an education platform that is both online and in-person courses, with about 40 education partners. And we've delivered nearly 1.3 million hours of content over our lifespan, and have many course catalog users. The catalog includes content in, I believe, 6 languages, maybe 7. So again, grateful for our partners around the world that make that possible. We also have some school-focused resources for K-12 schools that mainly is focused in the United States, but could be a good model for others. And Lead Lab, which is in 14 countries. That's a university partnership to train students in how to implement O&M improvements in a building and go through the documentation process. And then lastly, through our credentials, we're reaching hundreds of thousands of individuals through the credential process and testing, as well as continuing education. Next, Malia. It's just a snapshot of our course catalog. I just want to highlight, there's free, so we do have some that are for purchase, but we do have quite a bit of free content as well. So just want to make that clear to those who may be watching online or later and want to explore and are not members. We also have a membership benefit for education. And then there are, similar to the portal, you'll be able to look at different topics. There's playlists that sort of help you dig into certain areas of building practice. Okay. Next, please. Yeah. And having a slide issue, but we have a recent resource I wanted to highlight. We partnered with ASHRAE, the Association of HVAC Engineers, basically, and NYSERDA, the New York State Department for Energy Research and Development Authority, and on this guide to strategic decarbonization planning for a building. And we have the guide is free, and there's now an online workbook that's also free for anyone to use. You don't have to be a lead project. Just trying to encourage more existing buildings to have a plan to understand their equipment turnover as well as financial cost, so that it's not all of a sudden they have to switch everything, but that you have control and can pursue that. So, all right, so with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Vincent Chen, who's Deputy CEO of Delta Electronics Foundation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Distinguished delegates and colleagues. My name is Vincent Chen from Delta Electronics Foundation. Today I'm going to show how Delta decades green building experience and our new AI-enabled teaching system for this system for policymaker and practitioner to build out the workforce to advance the building breakthrough B5 capacity and the skill for the near zero emission and resilient building. Okay, next, thank you. Our story started with Mr. Bruce Chen. Once he said people must learn to coexist with our environment and adjust our behaviors to be in harmony with nature. Bruce Chen founded Delta Electronics Corporate in year of 1971. Then later he donated his own personal share to establish Delta Electronics Foundation to ensure the sustainability will become our core mission of our foundation. Next, please. Delta not only advocate sustainability, we build it. So since the year of 2006, Delta has already built over 30 LEED green buildings worldwide, which include 21 certificate green factory or office building, 2 data centers, and we also donate five campus, which include the LEED Zero certified building. Totally, we save 45 million kilowatt of electricity and 23,000 tons of CO2 emission by year of 2024. Next. To ensure the technology can be matched by the human capacity, so we cooperate with USGBC since the year of 2009. We organize the Green Color Architect training workshop every year to cultivate the green building professionals. Since the year of 2019, the program has evolved into the LEED Zero certification course. And we already training over 5,000 practitioners And this is also the first Mandarin course certified by USGBC. Okay, next, please. Under this kind of experience, I guess all of you have used the artificial intelligence. I think most of you will say when you use the AI, and that can give you a question, but the question could be not you want. So we try to design a Delta Lead AI teaching assistant, and not just only a simple question and answer tool, but we intend to let this system become a learning facilitator. So this kind of new system is we will provide the V5 Insight support, and we also wish this system can support the personalized learning and track progress through the Q&A. And we hope this can be impact to the learner and or the user, can deepen their understanding of the LEAD V5 concept and its application. So, and not only for the knowledge, but also encourage active and self-directed learning process. This can be forced and continuous interaction and reflect thinking. Next, please. This is how it works. It's a little bit unlike the AI you use. We need to fine-tune, for example, like a very popular AI like ChatGPT. Actually, we also use the ChatGPT, but we need to transform it to achieve our purpose. This is how it works. We use the we call the retrieval augmented generation technology to build out a human and AI co-learning system. This is how it works. When you ask, for example, when you ask our system, what's the climate resilient prerequisites in the V5 system? And when the user asks this question will deal with the AI. They will retrieve the document we provide, which is V4, V5, and also our Delta Lead Zero cases documentation. So that will limit the AI to think about within this kind of a range. So they will combine, they will produce the question, which is the prompt, and with the retrieval data together, we call it augmented prompts. Then these augmented prompts, they will send to be processed. We call the process engine, we call the large language model, which is we use here is a ChatGPT for a minute. Then they can think. So the ChatGPT for all, they can restrict the thinking at the document we provide. So within seconds, they can generate accurate and clear and also well-referenced response. So the answer will send back to the user. If the user will not satisfy, the user will continue to ask if they don't understand the expertise that the AI provides. So this becomes a circle. Not only for the human being can learn more deeper the new technology of like the DV5s and kind of new system, they will emphasize on the biodiversity and also the embodied carbon issue. This is quite a new issue for most of the practitioner and even for the policymaker. So the user will continue to ask, but the AI can also learn from the question prompt. So this becomes what we call the human the AI co-learning system. Okay, next. Next, thank you. Okay, this is what we mean about the zero emission and the resilient buildings. I give you an example of Lama Sha Minquan Elementary School. This school was destroyed by the big typhoon on the year of 2009. And our foundation rebuilt this elementary school campus. And we transformed this school not only for the education, but also become like a refugee center for the local communities. So this building they can be self-sufficient renewable energy and water, and even we have stored the food for 7 days for the AQV. So far we already, because the typhoon always visits Taiwan, so we already shared 5,000 AQV so far. Okay, so this is our understanding of the net zero emission and the resilient buildings. Okay, next. How can our AI system can contribute to this B5 system? We provide a replica RAG based AI framework for the key stakeholder, and we can enhancing the reliability and reduce the inaccurate AI output. So if in the future you want to work with, we can work together. You can provide your document, and we can help you to fine-tune the whole system to let you to use. So this is also kind of integration of AI module to the latest LEED and NZERB. If curricula, if the host NZERB, they comes out the latest criteria or all the document, they can integrate together. So and we can use this system for prompt and scalable learning. Okay, next. So our mission is quite easy but very powerful. So we always say we want to be smarter, greener, and together. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation as we collectively aim to make near zero emission resilient buildings.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chen. Next, we'll hear from Nina Hosman, Regional Vice President, Commonwealth Association of Architects.
Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation as we collectively aim to make near zero emission resilient buildings the global norm by 2030. One truth becomes increasingly clear. Our ability to act at scale depends on our ability to learn together. Across the building's value chain, from policymakers to investors to designers, contractors, and operators, we continue to work with uneven levels of climate literacy, fragmented tools, and inconsistent interpretations of what good looks like. This fragmentation slows implementation. It limits the impact of near zero emission resilient buildings aligned policy, and it creates uncertainty for practitioners who must deliver on the ground. What we need is not just more training, but a shared, cohering foundation of knowledge that aligns expectations across disciplines, geographies, and generations. This is exactly why 5 years ago a global group of volunteers established the Climate Framework Initiative. It was created to break down the silos in the industry and enable cross-pollination of expertise and experiences across the built environment value chain. It was also created to build a common language for climate and nature, cultivate a global community where not only experts, but also people across generations exchange knowledge and experiences, as well as align expectations across education and professional practice. In this initiative, we also aim to create a continuous and a far stronger than today thread of knowledge that meaningfully connects academia and industry. In this way, we will be able to close feedback loops by bringing the know-hows of practice into the next generation of built environment professionals' core education. And also by leveraging the best academic research, we're able to inform the progress and help deliver the innovation the construction sector continuously needs. The ultimate goal of this initiative is to equip every built environment actor with the understanding required to make climate positive decisions consistently, confidently, and at scale. To support this ambition, the Climate Framework contextualizes the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030 within the built environment sector. And it provides a structured foundation for the holistic knowledge and skills we all need as key decision makers. The framework is structured around 6 overarching themes of human factors, circular economy, energy and carbon, water, ecology and biodiversity, and connectivity and transport, each additionally presented with deeper set of subtopics. This structure was shaped through an extensive global consultation for nearly 3 years, where we engaged more than 900 contributors around the world and earned the support of over 150 organizations. Among the first supporters of this effort, the Royal Institute of British Architects became the first institution in the world to adapt the climate framework's topics and define their climate literacy mandatory competence, aligning professional expectations with the knowledge needed to deliver climate responsible practice in the UK and beyond. To support the industry further, the RIBA Climate Guide was created as a practical, globally relevant resource that distills the climate framework's themes into accessible, practical guidance for global use, supporting both day-to-day decisions and long-term climate strategies. But guidance alone is not enough. For climate literacy to be effective, it must be anchored in reliable, up-to-date, and easily accessible knowledge. That is why we also built the Climate Library, which is a freely accessible, curated, and peer-reviewed global knowledge hub. It consolidates over 500 resources, ranging from papers, guidelines, standards, webinars, books, and many others. It also additionally has more than 100 case studies of built projects from around the world, all organized through the Climate Framework's taxonomy and aligned against the UN SDGs. This library amplifies and connects existing knowledge developed by many leading organizations around the world to ensure there is equitable access to high-quality resources for practitioners and all the key decision makers across the sector. Climate Library intends to build clarity, coherence, and confidence across the value chain. When governments, educators, and practitioners draw from a common foundation, policies will be easier to implement, skills will be easier to transfer, and climate-positive decisions will become far more consistent. To solidify this shared foundation internationally, we're advancing a global climate literacy memorandum of understanding with the leading professional institutes across the UK and through the Commonwealth Association of Architects. This MOU commits signatories to embed climate literacy in education and professional practice, align expectations across disciplines and regions, and support the development of a free climate and nature training program based on the climate framework's overarching topics. To reinforce this global effort, Commonwealth Association of Architects, along with 16 institutions across the Commonwealth, signed a knowledge-sharing partnership a few years ago. This is to bring together academia, industry, professional bodies, and training providers. This partnership aims to create the continuous learning ecosystem needed for the MOU commitments to translate into measurable capability across the value chain. As I conclude this presentation, I would like to invite you to join this growing community, contribute to the Climate Library, support the global MOU, and participate in the knowledge sharing partnership. The more aligned we are, the faster we can make near zero resilient buildings the global norm. Thank you.
Great. Next, we will hear from Kaiko Sagoda, Senior Disaster Risk Specialist at the World Bank.
Hi everyone.
Hi, my name is Keiko Sakura. I'm a Senior Disaster Risk Management Specialist working for the World Bank. I'm representing a global thematic line called Building Regulation for Resilience, which work with the government in low and middle income countries to advance the building regulatory framework to make the built environment more resilient, safe, green, and inclusive. We would like to share today what we develop as a kind of tools to support that process. Maybe we don't need to provide a context for today's audience, but I just wanted to highlight building regulatory framework and implementation capacity is a powerful tools to make the built environment more resilient, green, and inclusive, because we are expecting a large number of new building stocks to be built in next decades, and also existing buildings are aging and require adaptive reuse and also improving the resilience in terms of structural safety. So again, I'm representing the World Bank's global thematic area called Building Regulation for Resilience, which is housed at the global unit of the Climate and Disaster Risk Management at the World Bank and financed by the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, which is called GFDRR. To support the government of low and middle income countries to advance the building regulatory framework, we came up with operational framework and also tools to do so in more efficient and effective way. So the operational framework consists of three key components. One is legislation, regulation, and code, which are foundational of the guiding market. And the second component is a building control process and compliance mechanism. The third element is enabling environment, which basically enable to implement the legislation requirements and also the controlling and compliance mechanism. When we are requested to support any country, first we need to understand where the country is. To understand that perspective, we develop two different tools to quickly assess where the country is. So I talk about two tools that you see on the right side. I start from the one which is in the bottom, Building Regulatory Capacity Assessment 2.0. This is an assessment methodology which covered three key components that I mentioned earlier. And we usually apply this to identify the priority actions for the reforms and investment in a particular country to advance the building regulatory framework and improve the capacity of the implementation. If the country already have some sort of regulations, we also apply something called building code checklist, which you see on the upper side. There are 4 different modules, and we apply all 4 of them together to come up with to look into the contents of the building code. What are the existing provisions? Where opportunity exists to improve the current existing regulations. This is an example of the 2 tools that I mentioned earlier. So the checklist have 4 modules, and then we basically develop based on the code comparative analysis of more than 10 countries, different building code, particularly good examples from different geographical coverage and also economic development status and also different climate. And 4 different tools have different checklists, and but these checklists cover key topics that are addressed in good example of the building codes from those leading countries. And then by completing this checklist, you'll be able to find where the opportunity exists to further enhance the existing building code. Or if the country doesn't have any building code, this checklist can become a guiding document for you to have a comprehensive building code. The right side, you see Building Regulatory Capacity Assessment 2.0. So this has 3 pillars of diagnostic question. And by completing these questions, you are able to distill some recommendation that shed the light of the priority actions for the reforms and investment, and you'll also be able to develop implementation plan in sequence manner. This helped the government to identify the immediate action required and also what needs to be done for the long term. We usually apply those country-specific analysis to begin with. However, there are also cases that, we don't have time, and then we are requested to provide immediate input to the countries. So we developed some kind of baseline information for some country. We conducted global and regional study. For example, the global assessment we recently conducted that covered 22 countries from different 6 regions. And Sub-Saharan African report, which conducted 2 years ago, this covered 48 countries of the Sub-Saharan African region. These basically distill the baseline information where they are at the summary level, but provide a good information to identify the entry points. On the right side, you see country reports. These are application examples of the BRCA I mentioned earlier. This is an example of the assessment methodology we utilize for the global assessment. We look into the 3 different aspects of the building code contents, and also the 4th element, we looked into the building code implementation environment. And these are example of country profile and then the summary information from the Sub-Saharan African report. But basically, by analyzing, we also provided the finding of the summary according to the topic we analyzed, but we also provided a country level summary at the end of the 2 reports. So where you see specific countries information in one glance. On the right-hand side, you see the summary information for the Sub-Saharan African countries. And this is, we summarize in this way because we realize there are similar status of the countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, and then there are similar recommendation can be helpful for those group of countries. So by analyzing country status, we could develop some kind of curated recommendation for different status of the country situation. Then lastly, I would like to share customized guidance for specific building types. For example, health facilities, school building require specific function in the design. And these 2 different kind of tools are developed by the GFDR can provide, again, the self-guiding question or the framework to think through. These guidance document will help you to think through how your building can be developed in resilient, green, and inclusive manner. So I would like to share more about how we apply these tools to the country, and then what was the findings and how we took the recommendation and findings to the implementation stage. But today we are at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions or if you have any interest to work with us, please reach out to us, and we look forward to collaborating with you. Thank you.
Excellent. And then lastly, we will hear from Filippo Calcerano, who is Senior Researcher at the National Research Council of Italy on their resources.
Hi everyone, and sorry for not being there with you. I am Filippo Calcerano, Senior Researcher of the National Research Council of Italy within the Institute of Heritage Science, where I'm part of the Built Heritage Innovation Lab, which deals with conservation and diagnostic, energy renovation with a simulation-based approach, and IT-based knowledge management. We're also part of the mobile laboratory of the European Research Infrastructure for Heritage Science, ERIS, providing energy and environmental analysis services to the research community. Here's our lab staff, headed by Elena Gigliaretti. A few words about the context. We all know that cultural heritage plays a key role in the Sustainable Development Goal agenda and is threatened by the impacts of climate crisis, thus requiring adaptation strategies. But mitigation is also key because, from a conservation perspective, reducing management costs and utility bills frees up resources for preventive conservation and helps fight energy poverty and the risk of building abandonment. From a climate change perspective, it contributes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, showing that cultural heritage is not only a victim of climate change but part of the solution. After all, the most sustainable building is the one that wasn't built, especially if you are reusing a historic building with a life cycle of several centuries. And it doesn't end there. We need to be bolder. Adaptation and mitigation when it comes to built heritage should be addressed together, as they can synergize to achieve higher results in combating the causes and effects of climate change. What should we do? Despite the EU being an early mover on the climate change adaptation mitigation policies and having strongly committed on the energy efficiency of the construction sector, a coordinated action on built heritage is still lacking. It is no coincidence that the Climate Heritage Network released his European Heritage Green Paper to assess the role that heritage should have in relation to the European Green Deal. The Italian debate today uses the wording energy and environmental improvement as opposed to simple regulatory compliance, meant as a valorization and protection strategy, however subordinate to conservation. Moreover, the study of built heritage from an environmental design perspective guarantees several advantages: disciplinary cross-fertilization, beacon role for the sector and mobilization potential of the society, technological stress test. If the process works on heritage, it can work anywhere, and added value of knowledge also for existing and new construction. Let's get technical. The challenges in this intervention lies in providing decision support, managing the process, deal with its interdisciplinarity, and address the financial point of view. And we've dealt with them all in the ENI CBC MED project BEEP, BEAM for Energy Efficiency in the Public Sector. We used numerical simulation to understand and analyze complex phenomena, enhance innovative application in the restoration and diagnostic, and ensure feedback on the impact of design choices. And we used building information modeling that, as a digital representation of the physical and functional characteristic of a built asset, is also a kind of simulation of reality, and within which it is possible to integrate geometric survey, multidisciplinary analysis, design and maintenance activities, developing a useful representation of the building over time that evolves with it and is kept ready for use every time a new intervention starts. Lastly, the financial support can be provided by tools like the energy performance contracting involving energy service companies and based on energy and cost savings obtained from redeveloped buildings. Let's get to the guideline we developed in the project. This is the backbone of the workflow guideline that helps defining the activities to be carried out based on the building complexity, data availability, and other characteristics such as the presence of systems or users. The goal is to ask the right question, estimate the required effort, allocate the appropriate amount of work to each task, and ensure a process that can be scaled and adjusted to different levels of detail in response to the specific complexities of each case study. The Heritage BEAM manages all data flows, keeping the process accessible, transparent, and lean. The different analysis results feeds in two fundamental phases within the simulation process: the energy model calibration and the evaluation of design solution. The approach is also designed to integrate the analysis results as they arrive, producing increasingly detailed model iteration until the moment of moving on to the simulation phase. The paper version of the guideline was published by CNR Edition. The online extended version, including also templates for tendering and outsourcing specific activities, is available for free online. And next year we will have an updated and interactive version with an identification of skills needed to perform the tasks. This will be done within Beacon project that is consolidating both the research approach and the technological transfer aspects of the study. And in the coming years we will produce something similar within Interreg Next Med Shaden project concerning renewable energy communities in historical cities. For outreach and advocacy, we collaborate with expert groups from the International Energy Agency and Building Smart, the organization that focuses on digitalization and standardization in the construction sector. Last year, at the Buildings and Climate Global Forum in Paris, with the Climate Heritage Network, we were able for the first time to have a session about existing and historical buildings addressing built heritage mitigation intervention for fighting climate change. And we keep adding other bricks to the culture-based climate action advocacy at COPs, like this one, to respond to the urgency of the society to be able to perform mitigation and adaptation interventions also on built heritage. And that is all. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, these excellent examples have shown what some of the resources that will be available through the new portal, and hoping to engage full range of the building sector, from practitioners and individuals through government, advocates, and institutions like education, to increase the capacity and expertise and knowledge within the building sector to support near zero emission and resilient buildings. So with that, pleased to turn things over to Ryan Kolker for the next session.
Great, thanks Liz, and really do appreciate the opportunity to see all these great examples within the portal coming soon. I'm pleased to be joined by Erin Ordauer, who's Environmental Deputy for Los Angeles County Supervisor Lindsay Horvath, who will be sharing some of the perspective from the local government. So, Erin, if you wouldn't mind. If you could just start by giving us a little bit of sort of the LA County context, sort of what are some of the challenges, the needs that you have within the building space, and maybe a little bit about sort of the more recent issues within the county and some of the challenges that you've faced.
Absolutely. Good morning. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you for the invitation, and to all of you for traveling here to be here in Belém doing this important work at such an important time for our climate. So my name is Erin Ordauer. I'm the deputy for Los Angeles County Supervisor Lindsay Horvath. She's one of the 5 local elected leaders who govern Los Angeles County in California in the United States. LA County has a population of 10 million people. We're the largest county in the United States. You probably know California is the largest state in the United States with about 40 million people. Our county has a population of larger than most United States subnational governments and states. So the context that we have in LA is actually quite large, and we pride ourselves in being still a climate leader and focused on I think the theme of this conference of actual implementation, moving beyond goal setting. LA County actually also has the unfortunate fame of being the county that is most prone to more natural disasters of any county in the United States as well. So whether that's heat waves, flood, drought, and of course wildfire, we are really struggling with our climate adaptation. And we saw that especially this year with the Palisades and Eaton fires, which were the most destructive natural disaster to ever hit our community in LA County, including the district that we represent. More than 18,000 individuals lost their homes in this climate-fueled fire. So we are thinking a lot about the built environment and what does it take to actually mobilize, to do the right policy, to get to keep people safe, but also to advance our climate action. And so I'll just briefly share that just last week, the county doubled down on our commitment. Our Board of Supervisors passed the Our County Plan, which is our Sustainability North Star Plan, which commits us to a carbon-free and a fossil fuel-free county by 2045. We're going to be doing building performance standards and rolling those out in the next coming years. We've also had some recent success in terms of passing kind of a first in the United States policy around extreme heat resiliency, a maximum indoor temperature threshold, where in the past it was just a minimum threshold for heating that was required for buildings, and now actually through our health code we are imposing a maximum temperature for rental units. really pushing that boundary and what is the most deadly climate risk, and the one that I think most people actually resonate with and experience on a daily basis. And of course, working on wildfire resiliency and those measures as we talk about buildings. And just I'll close out and say, before this role, I was in the New York City Mayor's office working on that team, doing building performing standards, Local Law 97, the first major building standards in the US, and happy to reflect a little bit on that.
Great. Really do appreciate that perspective, and particularly sort of both sides of the coin relative to both climate adaptation and mitigation, and sort of how do you balance or optimize against both of those issues. LA County, LA City are very developed building departments, yet probably not without sort of challenges as new codes, new policies are implemented. What do you see as the greatest needs around capacity building within the community to assure that you achieve those goals that you just outlined?
Yeah, that's a great point. And it is really capacity building and knowledge at all levels of the ecosystem, from policymakers to the builders, architects and engineers, to the laborers and the actual construction industry. There really does need to be an education, and then of course to the consumer, there needs to be an education that goes to each level, and that's what's so, I think, exciting about the diversity of resources that are being laid out here that are really speaking to these different pieces of that important puzzle. I'll share a quick anecdote. Maybe 2 months ago, my water heater at my home broke. I have a 100-year-old house in the middle of LA. Of course, I want to do the right thing, replace my old gas unit with an electric heat pump. There's incentives. You can almost $4,000 back right now from government incentives for this. My plumber had never heard of a heat pump water heater before. The building inspector that came out to check and this finally installed the system had never seen one of these units before. They figured it out, they could do it, but it's still, we're at the early stage of moving the whole economy, moving all those stakeholders along through it. There was a comment that one of you made earlier, I think, about the need for political will as a given for this. And I think that part of that, there's often a will in a place like Los Angeles or New York or more progressive or large cities, but there's not necessarily an education of that this can be cost effective, that this can save on the long run for the building occupants, or even that this doesn't lead to things like displacement of legacy residents, which is often a thing that we see. So I think the resources, not just on the technical side, but also balancing cost, other political factors, housing law, all those things can kind of come together to help mobilize in more of a developed economy context.
Yeah, certainly appreciate that. And one of the things that we did identify as we were sort of working through content for the portal is really just getting a sort of common understanding of what is a near zero emission and resilient building and what are the steps to actually achieve it. And so, sort of having that ability to work across the entire value chain, although we're sort of having comments of whether it's a chain or a circle or something like that, given sort of the conversations around circularity, but that's a whole nother, whole other conversation. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about some of the things that you do in the county as far as some of that outreach, and how do you engage citizens in particular? Because certainly, having the great goals is one thing, but actually the implementation and getting consumers comfortable with new technologies, new strategies. Any thoughts on sort of what you're currently doing in that area?
Of course. To the point that was made in one of the presentations earlier, we've spent a lot of time, I would say, researching, figuring this out, because we're a little bit on a leading edge in some of this work. Doing the survey, hiring consultants to go out and talk to other cities or counties or states to see what they've done in this space, meet with all of our respective industry stakeholders, collections of tenants organizations, and actually move to basically it's a pretty time-intensive and labor-intensive work to go through that, whether that was for the cooling protections that we just passed this past August that I mentioned, or for the building performance standards that we're hoping to bring next year to our Board of Supervisors. And as an advisor to a politician, it's my role to work with her and with our technical departments in government to make sure that stakeholder engagement, that technical analysis is done robustly enough that we understand the pros and cons, so that we understand, I guess we have a pathway to actually accomplishing these goals. And it's always easier when we're doing something that's been done somewhere else exactly. When it's new, when it's the first time, or when it's not been done in a context, say, in California, it takes a little bit more work.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. And one of the other things that we identified in sort of looking at the portal is some of the challenges around multi-level governance. So you sit currently at the county level, in New York City at the city level, but can you talk a little bit about sort of that relationship from sort of county to state to national government, and how sort of the priorities flow? Maybe any challenges, any opportunities to sort of make those relationships better?
It's essential, and something that's very helpful is when our department, so we have the largest public works department in the United States. When we have our public works department or our architects who actually participate in the national and the state code process, it builds the capacity locally. They get that knowledge. They feel invested in it. This is playing out also, for example, with in a kind of a different context, but our fire department is super involved with coming up with the new standards for batteries and energy and battery storage. California is the largest, has the largest amount of deployed battery energy storage in the United States. Coming up to actually have the buy-in to those standards so that we can then bring those home, it's essential. Whenever we're having a code that is coming down from the federal level or from the state level, the friction of getting it passed locally is so much less. When it's standardized, it's recognized as such. We just did a building code update, which was fairly significant. It was the triennial code update, but there's a lot of new things in there. There wasn't even a discussion of it, not a word of it at our Board of Supervisors, because it was assumed to already have been accepted. This is what we're doing. The stuff like the heat ordinance, very controversial, very challenging to do. So as much as we can anchor into those state and national discussions, and really international discussions at this level, the better off we are of making that sustainable change.
Great. You saw the different tools that were identified from a wide variety of sort of different technology levels, sort of leveraging AI and building information models, but then also something down to a checklist. Maybe some thoughts on sort of those tools, but also are there other sort of tools or things that you've seen that would be sort of particularly helpful as people think about sort of filling the gaps in the development of resources?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually thinking in the AI discussion that given the robust library that you already have and that you're certainly going to have as more and more resources come into this, there's probably a role for AI to play in actually navigating those tools. I would love to be able to point to a lot of those resources myself and in the work that we're doing, but it can be a little overwhelming, especially when things are in a PDF, a robust, thoughtful, peer-reviewed, etc. report. But to actually be able to more easily identify the salient research, we're busy people in our work, decision makers, I have the luxury of just working on environment, but there's, 20 subcategories of environment that I'm responsible for. The politician that I work with has 1,000 things that she's responsible for. The bandwidth of attention that we get for those key decision makers, and she's lucky she has someone like me. Most of them don't actually have someone who's just focused in that area. So to be able, the more you can create the tools, I think to search within the tools, I think would be very useful. I want to emphasize cost. so often, especially from the fossil fuel industry, the resistance to doing green buildings is that natural gas is cheaper, natural gas is better, even new construction. And I've seen so much data, so many studies out there showing that that's not the case. But until you've proven that out in your marketplace, there's the default to the status quo. So more cost and case studies is great. I loved also hearing about the European example of the heritage buildings and those retrofits. This was especially important in New York City with the older building stock. How important it is, how useful it is to have those case studies that are out there of, a seemingly impossible preservation, historic preservation type building to not have to sacrifice doing the green, and how you can incorporate creative design into it. That stuff is really essential because it's just to close out, I can't emphasize, people get whatever their, the final decision maker in these things, they'll have this one example in their head of like, oh, the house down the street, the building that this person I know, my uncle's building, they have this issue and they've, how could this possibly apply to them? You have to bring it back to the human side of decision makers at the end, and being able to easily point someone to the resource, no, this is how they could easily accomplish these goals, can remove some of those road barriers, I'd say.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to invite Liz back up, and our other panelists that are here in the room have an opportunity for questions from the audience, or we can have a discussion if all of you don't have questions. But I don't know if Liz, you want to do it? You want me to do it? What?
Yeah, if I can kick it off, and that was a great discussion. Thank you. I had a similar story with my mother's heat pump water heater, and the plumber like, what? And I said, look at the incentives, like, ta-ding, and we made it happen. But really wondering, how do we get these kind of resources out to more people? Because ultimately, there's so much great stuff and examples of cutting edge policy, of talking points, of case studies of great buildings and retrofits, but we just need more people to get on board. So what are some of the ways that you've, Dr. Chen and Aaron, how you've reached out to more people and expanded the audience?
I could start quickly and say, at least in the cities I've worked in, New York City, Los Angeles, we rely on the great partnership of partner organizations that work with industry. The U.S. Green Building Council in California, the Urban Green, and the Building Energy Exchange in New York City. They do the work, and I think supporting those and joining those local organizations so that they feel bought into tools like this, so that they can bring it back out to those ultimate decision makers, is probably the way to best leverage already existing networks rather than trying to create something from scratch.
For our side, we hold the workshop for the lead every year. So we invite expertise and also collect a lot of document resource, and we open to the public for all free. So that's how we try to reach everyone, to the public, to expand our resource to everyone if they are interested. But however, they do need some kind of background expertise. So in the future, we will try to use the AI to create. For example, we can use the AI for different kind of language, so we can reach it to different audience from different country. And we can also let the AI become like a elementary school teacher. They can use our AI system to promote green building and the resilient idea to school boys and girls. So it's all kind of possibility in the future. Thank you.
Great. Can we go to Mina or Filippo? Would either of you like to come in on the question of examples of how to expand the reach to a bigger audience and reach more people?
Well, they're thinking about it. I can share some examples of sort of engaging more on the consumer level. So ICC is an organizer of Building Safety Month, which is also sort of celebrated around the world as Building Safety Day or Building Safety Week, where there's really an opportunity to be out in the community and engage folks in the various different opportunities that there are, how they can contribute to building safety, building sustainability. And so at the local level, you'll have city or county departments host various different events within the community during the month. They will sort of present resources and tools at the local hardware store, for instance, where folks are coming in and making decisions on sort of what they can do for their home. And so that's definitely an area to sort of have increased outreach to the public.
Great. We're trying to work through how we can bring in our virtual speakers, but while we're waiting, we can, okay? Mina, would you like to come in? Thank you. Filippo, would you like to come in?
Instead of focusing on threshold values, we've seen in Europe either based on the European Energy Performance Computing Directive, in which we have threshold values to be achieved, results in either the historical feeding value transfer or the maladaptation, which is a stretch to achieve those threshold values. I think the regulation should focus more on the minimum requirements of the process. There is a need to use advanced diagnostics and simulation to manage all the expertise involved, and regulations should focus on rewarding employing advanced rules, because it's extremely hard if a building undergone a good inspection just by looking at something like an energy lab and stuff like that. So we need to go deeper. That if we don't, we risk maladaptation, but we need to have regulation acknowledge that sometimes, usually we need more time, and sometimes and that's also going to be into cost. So if you keep doing research comparison with suicide intervention and existing legislative structure, to keep maintaining this kind of problem of different treatment of different studies.
Thank you. So maybe as a final question, or next to last question, Ryan may have one. What are some of the policies that can be used, or intervention by government that really help advance education and training throughout the value chain? So I'm thinking, for example, in the United States, we have a bill that we've worked on that would provide funding for climate education for students in kindergarten through 12th grade, as one example. Not passed yet, but we will keep working on it. And some states have standards that include minimum exposure to climate issues, and I think including buildings, as well as career information to help excite the next generation. So that's just one example of a policy. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add?
Yeah, I can certainly add one. I think thinking about sort of the professionals and the trade people that are in this space, and sort of need to think beyond just I'm installing a water heater. Thinking about sort of certification and continuing education requirements that are specifically around new technologies, new policies, and new practices. So, how does climate resilience, climate mitigation sort of fit within the individual trades and professionals within the building industry?
Our situation in Taiwan for the building and the construction field, and our foundation will focus on the embodied carbon issue, because it's this will be the total carbon emission belong to the whole building system. So we are trying to do this kind of research and try to persuade our government to also consider the embodied carbon issue into the whole building systems. Thank you.
I'll add a couple things. One, again, I do think the necessity of engaging through our building trades and our engineering and design professionals as early as possible to understand what the changing landscape, as was discussed, is really critical. And there's more and more opportunities. There's a lot of money out there, at least in the United States, for traditional workforce development, helping people find jobs, to the extent that we can seize on that for those kind of green jobs is critical. The other thing I've been reflecting on is, as resiliency becomes a bigger part of this, bringing our climate-informed work into a public safety lens, and I think it will both help people to see that these types of interventions actually help to keep the end building resident user much safer, whether that's from heat, indoor air exposure, wildfire smoke exposure is a big thing in our region. And again, to share a quick anecdote, we've in recovering from the fires this year, there's been no controversy whatsoever in terms of changing to the code to have different materials that are more fire resilient, or gutter requirements to not allow embers that can go in and help to spread a fire in our high fire severity zone. On the flip side, we've been struggling to keep our solar requirements for those rebuilds, because those are seen as unnecessary costs. Even though we know that those kinds of systems help to keep the power on, telecommunications going, etc., we haven't been successful in making that into a public safety discussion around that energy resilience. So I think to the extent that we can sort of bring this into public safety lingo, it will help us to move forward at all levels.
Mina or Filippo, would you like to come in? Mina, would you like to speak to policies to help support training?
I can, sorry, my internet connection's a bit poor. I think in fact this is not necessarily one policy, this is sort of latent and related to what we're discussing today. I think one key policy that the government could help introduce, and something that has been touched upon before, is the sort of the demand on understanding the carbon or the carbon impact of the decisions that we're making today in the built environment sector. And I'm specifically narrowing down the question to embodied carbon because that's one area that we desperately need globally, I think, in greater regulation and greater accountability. Because if that becomes mandated as a base practice, at least like the measurement of embodied carbon, let alone measures targets, I think for the construction sector, that actually can rapidly scale up the education around that subject matter. So I know this carbon and embodied carbon is only one part of the story when we talk about greater resilience and climate adaptation concerns that we're touching on here. But if we start small, again, I'm always very keen on understanding how we can start with one aspect of it, and if accountability can be embedded for the construction sector, at least in the building regulations in the form of embodied carbon, benchmarking and measurement and reporting, and then they can drastically tomorrow scale up the education and awareness on the subject matter as well and related to competition.
I mean, I think especially about the challenge I work with research institution, and it's easier to be interdisciplinary, while but curriculum for advancing in the career in the academic sector is more sealed. So we actually need it interdisciplinarity, and we train for interdisciplinarity in the university, but it's not easy to have that kind of curriculum and getting through with that curriculum when getting into the academy. Maybe it's a bit different in the job market, but yeah, I think that we also need to nudge research and academy in the way that which research is evaluated, so that that kind of interdisciplinary curriculum, being able to put together engineering, physics, informatics, heritage, is not like black swan, but it's something that is actually increasingly used and can produce an impact also in professional practice and in the construction sector.
Thank you, Filippo and Mina, and all of our speakers for joining us today. Don't disconnect yet, because we're going to try to get a hybrid photo at the end, Mina and Filippo. But unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time. We don't have any time for our audience questions, but hopefully our speakers will be able to hang out for a little bit. I think this was a really enriching discussion, and it came together really nicely. I want to give kudos to the AV team that pulled this off. Really great job. Thank you for enabling this hybrid session, and for our our remote speakers for making really great videos in advance. So I hope that everyone found some value and will continue to track what's happening with the portal and use it and contribute to it and tell everyone about it, socialize it, because I think it's a really great tool to help us not reinvent the wheel and to move forward together on achieving NZERB goals. So thank you all for being here today. A big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.